everyone, it's Sheri Vegas here, and in this resin tutorial today I'm going to show you the easiest and most simple way that you can create that 3D bloom effect using resin and alcohol inks. In this tutorial today, I'm going to show you what to do, but I'm also going to include in what not to do, because sometimes that is just as important, knowing what not to do, as it is knowing what to do, especially when you are working with a harder technique like this, creating those 3D blooms. So on one side I'm going to have what not to do, and on the other side I'm going to have what to do. And the first one is using the wrong type of casting resin. I've got two different casting resins here. I've got the Make Art Crystal Cast, which is a great casting resin for embedding items. It's got a really fluid viscosity to it. And then on my left hand side I've got the Barnes Epoxy Cast, which has got a medium viscosity to it, and it's great for holding pigment. So with my crystal cast resin, because it is so fluid, you're going to find that it won't hold pigment as well, and sometimes when you create those petals they can expand out too much. So picking the right type of casting resin can make a huge impact on how your petals look. The next don't on the list is using too much pigment and the wrong type of pigment. This is titanium white from Just Resin. Titanium white is a really dense and heavy pigment, and so by using it to create my blooms, you'll probably find that it will sink to the bottom and expand out too much because it's more dense than the resin it's going in. But on the other side, I'm just going to be using an alcohol ink. This one's from Pinata. Any white will do. A white alcohol ink is great to create that petal effect for two reasons. It's a lot lighter than your titanium white, so it's not going to necessarily sink to the bottom. And also too, because it is an alcohol ink, it has a really cool chemical reaction when it is mixed in the resin, which causes it to expand out. Now saying that, you can still use the titanium white to create those bloom petal effect. You just need to use it really sparingly. Do not overload with the amount of titanium white you add into your resin, and also to add a little bit of that alcohol ink to help that titanium white expand out and not sink straight to the bottom. Into the center of both of my pieces, I'm just adding these gold chips. I really like these because they are quite heavy, so they sink straight to the bottom and don't float around like glitter would. And I also really like them because they're just generally pretty. These ones are from Kmart, but so many places are now selling them. I like to add these into the center, one because it makes it the center of my flower. It also helps giving me like a starting off point, and I just find it makes it a lot easier to keep the whole petal and flower very even the whole way around with having that in the middle. To add some color into my flower, I'm going to be using alcohol inks. So I'm starting off with my darkest color on the center, and then I'm using a different colored alcohol ink and I'm going around that, and I'm just trying to keep them fairly even, and I'm doing a decent amount because I do find alcohol inks are very light, especially these because they're not Pinata, they are like the Copic ones, they're not as strong. So I generally do a decent amount of drops, and then I like to use my paddle pop stick and just give that like a swirl through, just to create a really pattern and blend them so you don't see like the distinct lines between all three of the colors. And you can do this in whatever color alcohol ink you want to do, but just give them a slight swirl just to help blend them out. And I'm going to do the exact same on my other piece, the same colors, the same amount. The next big don't is by adding your white resin, making your petals too soon. So casting resins need to thicken a bit so that way when you do add your petals, the white doesn't fully expand out into the clear and you lose all shape. Especially with a casting resin like this one, which is extremely fluid, if I add my white in too soon, it's just going to completely blend out and lose all definition and shape. Another big don't is don't pour your white right up to the edge of your mold, because you're not giving it any room for it to expand out, and it's going to hit the edge of the mold and just completely blend. So those are two really big don'ts when it comes to creating this bloom effect. And you can see how fast that white is already starting to expand out even though I've just poured it. Now let's get on to the do's. A really important do is check that your mold is level. Even if you're slightly off, if it is not completely level, you're going to find your resin is going to go off to one side, and that's going to give you an uneven flower, which is not what we want. So this is really important to do. Even if it's a tiny bit, it's going to make a big difference when it comes to this. Another really helpful tip is to put your alcohol inks down first before you do add your petals on. You can see how much the alcohol inks push and pull against each other. So if you add those on top once you've done your petals, it's going to change the shape of your petals. So always just add those down first. And I'm just giving it a swirl like I did on the first mold. For me, I generally find the easiest way to know when it is ready to pour my white is to check the temperature. So around 40 is normally the perfect temperature to pour the white. So I've got this thermometer that I use. Then I just drop a drop right over the top of those gold chips. You don't even see it because the gold is there. That's also another reason why I do like to add those gold chips into the center. And if it sinks straight down to the bottom, I know it's too soon. But if it sits on the surface like that, I know it's the perfect time to start pouring. Some people do like to go by time when they do create their resin blooms, but I always prefer to go by temperature. I find it's a lot more accurate. The timing can change depending on the brand of resin you're using and the temperature of your room. So summer and winter you'll have different timing and that can throw you off. But the temperature I find will always be the most accurate. So always pouring around that 40 will mean that you're going to get resin that will expand out enough to create really beautiful petals, but not too much that the shapes completely disappear. There is multiple different ways to pour your white to create different shaped petals and different flower styles. So if you do want another tutorial on all the different ways that you can create different shaped petals, let me know in the comments below. This is one of my favorite to do and it's really effective but super simple. You go around dragging your paddle pop stick from the outside in, and then once you've done that, you go on each in-between petal and drag it from the inside out, and that creates a really beautiful star effect. You can see before to add my white, I pinched my paper cup and poured it out into a swirl. But if you want to create a different effect or you do struggle when it comes to pouring the white evenly, you can always use your paddle pop stick and dip it into your cup and drag it through. I'm using this to create little sort of dashes throughout my resin, going around and around, slowly working the way to the outer edge. Sometimes people can find this a lot easier than trying to pour that white out. Some people also like to use piping bags to pour the white out. Honestly, it just comes down to whatever you find works best for you. The different techniques will create different effects. So with this one, I've done everything the exact same as before. The only difference is instead of pouring my white out into a swirl, I'm pouring it out, well, not actually even pouring it. I'm using my paddle pop stick, dipping it into the white and then dragging that to create little dashes. And I feel like this gives a really sort of rose slash peony effect to my flower. I normally wait about 5 minutes before I use my paddle pop stick to start swirling those white petals through the alcohol ink. But I did forget and it was actually 15 minutes later and the resin did start to set up slightly. So don't do that. Make sure you put a timer on if you're going to walk away. But luckily it wasn't too late and I was still able to swirl the resin and get my really beautiful peony effect. But just make sure that if you do walk away from your resin, stick a timer on so you don't leave it too late. But these are the finished pieces and I'm so happy. I'm going to show you the first two that are my do's. So this is that peony slash rose. I really like this. It really pops when you put a black background behind it. Trying to get my camera to focus was so hard on these resin pieces, but I love this. I feel like it's very beautiful, very peony vibes. Obviously you can do whatever colored alcohol inks you like, but you get a really beautiful soft petal effect with this. And you can see none of that white has dropped down and gone to the bottom of the mold. It's all expanded out beautifully. And the same with this star flower that I did. I have such beautiful definition. You can still see that it expanded out really nicely, but no dropout. Really stunning. Now I'm going to show you the one which is the don't, and you can see everything that was wrong with it. It completely expanded out. It completely dropped to the bottom of the mold. There's no definition, and you can also see on the other side the alcohol ink is all off to one side because I did not level this out. So that is the don'ts. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. It always helps me out. And if you are new to my channel, make sure you subscribe. I've got a full playlist on different resin tutorials that you'll probably really love if you enjoyed this.